In 2006, bees across the United States started dying rapidly. So environmental activists put out a simple call to action: save plants and crops by saving the bees.
The FDA just quietly removed 5 major honey brands from their safe list, but grocery stores are still selling them to unsuspecting families. While you've been trusting those familiar labels, something disturbing has been hiding in plain sight. What did independent lab tests reveal that has food safety experts genuinely worried? You know what's funny about honey? We treat it like it's all the same golden stuff, but some brands are about as authentic as a $3 bill. Take Great Value honey, for instance. This Walmart staple sits on shelves everywhere, and millions of people grab it without a second thought. But here's where things get sticky, and not in a good way. Great Value honey goes through something called ultrafiltration. Sounds fancy, right? Well, it's basically like putting honey through a car wash that strips away everything interesting about it. This process removes almost all the pollen, which is like taking the fingerprints off honey. Without pollen, you can't trace where the honey came from or what flowers the bees visited. Makes sense, right? It's like buying a mystery meat sandwich. You have no idea what you're really getting. The ultrafiltration doesn't stop at pollen removal. It also wipes out naturally occurring enzymes and beneficial compounds that make real honey special. These are the good guys that give honey its health benefits and unique properties. But Great Value says nope to all that natural goodness. Here's something that'll make you scratch your head. Many people notice this honey doesn't crystallize like real honey does. Raw, minimally processed honey will naturally crystallize over time. It's actually a sign of quality. But Great Value honey stays suspiciously smooth and liquid, like it's been given some kind of anti-aging treatment. And the weird part is, people think this consistency is better. They've been conditioned to expect honey that pours like syrup and never changes texture. It's like preferring plastic flowers because they never wilt. Sure, they're convenient, but they're missing the whole point. Now, I'm not saying Great Value honey will harm you. It's cheap, it's consistent, and it sweetens your tea just fine. For some folks on a tight budget, it does the job. But if you're looking for actual honey, the kind that connects you to flowers, seasons, and the incredible work of bees, this ain't it. The processing is so thorough that what you're left with is essentially honey-flavored sugar water. It's like the difference between a fresh tomato from your garden and ketchup. Both came from tomatoes, but one's been through so much processing that it barely resembles the original. Great Value honey represents everything wrong with our food system's obsession with uniformity over authenticity. They've taken one of nature's most perfect foods and stripped it down to its most basic components. But don't worry, this is just the beginning of our honey horror show. Wait until you hear about the next brand that's playing hide and seek with its origins. Well, if Great Value honey felt like a mystery, wait until you meet Busy Bee honey. This stuff is like the international buffet of the honey world, and not in a good way. See, Busy Bee takes honey from everywhere. Brazil one week, Argentina the next, maybe throw in some from Vietnam for good measure. It's like they're collecting passport stamps instead of making quality honey. The problem? When you blend honey from 5 different continents, you end up with something that tastes like, well, nothing special. My grandmother used to say you can't make a good stew by throwing leftovers from 10 different kitchens into one pot. Same logic applies here. Each region's honey has its own personality. Wildflower from Texas Hill Country tastes completely different from clover honey from Wisconsin farms. But when you mix them all together, you get honey that's about as exciting as watching paint dry. The real kicker is the supply chain situation. Makes sense, right? When your honey travels more miles than a flight attendant, freshness becomes questionable. By the time that Brazilian honey gets blended with Mexican honey, shipped to a processing facility, then distributed to stores, it's been on more adventures than Indiana Jones. And here's what really gets me. They call it pure honey on the label. Technically true, sure, but it's like calling a hot dog pure meat. You're not wrong, but you're definitely not telling the whole story either. The flavor profile is where things get really disappointing. Remember how your dad used to complain that all chain restaurants taste the same no matter which city you visit? That's Busy Bee honey. No character, no regional flair, no seasonal variation. Just sweet, generic honey-flavored sweetness. Then there's the freshness factor nobody talks about. Local honey from nearby farms gets bottled within weeks of harvest. This multi-continental blend could have been sitting in warehouses for months before it even gets processed. It's like comparing fresh baked bread from your local bakery to that prepackaged stuff that somehow stays fresh for 2 weeks. But here's the weirdest part. Some people actually prefer the bland consistency. They want honey that tastes exactly the same every single time. No surprises, no seasonal changes, just predictable sweetness. It's the honey equivalent of always ordering vanilla ice cream. For basic cooking and baking, Busy Bee does the job. Your cookies won't know the difference, but if you're drizzling it on yogurt or making tea, you're missing out on what honey can actually taste like when it comes from somewhere specific. The sad truth? Most folks buying Busy Bee have no idea what single-source honey even tastes like. They've never experienced the floral notes of Tennessee sourwood or the bold character of buckwheat honey. Speaking of missing out on real honey character, our next culprit takes consistency to a whole new level. Sue Bee honey has been sitting on grocery store shelves for decades. Your grandparents probably bought it. Heck, maybe even their grandparents did too. But here's the thing about consistency that nobody talks about. Sometimes it comes at a price. That smooth, perfectly uniform texture, well, it doesn't happen by accident. Sue Bee processes their honey more heavily than your morning coffee routine. And trust me, I've seen some intense coffee rituals. The filtering process strips out nearly everything that makes honey, well, honey. We're talking about micronutrients, tiny bits of wax, and all that pollen that actually proves where your honey came from. It's like buying a vintage car and finding out someone replaced the original engine with a generic one from Home Depot. But wait, there's more troubling news. That consistent flavor you get every single time? Natural honey shouldn't taste exactly the same batch after batch. Real honey changes with the seasons. Bees visit different flowers throughout the year. Spring honey tastes different from fall honey because the little guys are basically nature's pickiest food critics. Sue Bee's honey tastes like honey-flavored sweetener. Nothing more, nothing less. Where's the complexity, the floral notes, the subtle differences that make honey fascinating? They've processed it right out of existence. Then there's the packaging situation. Those classic squeeze bottles and plastic bears aren't exactly screaming artisanal quality. They're designed for mass production and long shelf life. It's like comparing a handwritten love letter to a text message. Technically, they both communicate, but the experience is completely different. The weird part is how slowly Sue Bee honey crystallizes. Real, minimally processed honey will crystallize naturally over time. It's supposed to do that. But when honey has been filtered within an inch of its life, crystallization becomes as rare as finding a parking spot at the mall during Christmas shopping. Don't get me wrong, Sue Bee honey won't hurt you. It's perfectly safe. But if you're looking for actual honey benefits beyond just sweetness, you're basically buying expensive corn syrup's slightly more sophisticated cousin. The company focuses on shelf stability and consistent appearance because that's what mass retailers want. Makes sense from a business perspective, right? But it leaves honey enthusiasts feeling like they ordered steak and got a perfectly adequate hamburger instead. Your taste buds deserve better than this processed mediocrity. They deserve honey that actually tastes like the flowers the bees visited. Honey that changes slightly with each jar. Honey that crystallizes naturally because it's actually real. Speaking of disappointing honey experiences, let's talk about another brand that's mastered the art of being aggressively average. Here's something that might surprise you about store brand honey. Clover Valley honey tastes so mild and predictable that my grandmother would probably call it honey without the personality. Well, she'd be onto something bigger than she realizes. That ultra-mild flavor isn't nature's doing. It's the result of extensive filtering that strips away everything that makes honey interesting. Think about it this way. If honey is supposed to reflect the flowers bees visited, why does every bottle of Clover Valley taste exactly the same? Because they've filtered out the very components that create character. The filtering process removes pollen grains completely. Without pollen, you lose the floral fingerprint that tells you where your honey came from. It's like buying a postcard with no picture on it. Technically still a postcard, but missing the whole point. But here's where it gets really concerning. Those frequent source changes that come with store brands create another problem. 1 month, your honey might come from wildflowers in Nebraska. The next from clover fields in Argentina. Makes sense why they filter so heavily, right? They need everything to taste identical regardless of origin. My neighbor bought Clover Valley for 3 years straight. Never once saw it crystallize naturally like raw honey should. That's actually a red flag, not a convenience feature. Real honey crystallizes because it contains natural sugars and trace particles. When honey stays liquid forever in your pantry, it's telling you something important got removed. The crystallization timeline reveals everything. Raw honey typically starts forming crystals within 6 to 18 months. Clover Valley, still pouring smooth after 2 years. That's not superior processing. That's overprocessing. Store managers love products like this because they never get customer complaints about texture changes. Customers think they're getting consistency. Really, they're getting honey that's been stripped of its natural behavior patterns. And the weird part is how this affects your baking results. Bakers who switch from heavily filtered honey to raw honey often notice their bread rises differently, their cookies brown better. Those missing enzymes and trace minerals actually contribute to how honey performs in recipes. The price point makes Clover Valley tempting. Nobody wants to overpay for a sweetener, but when you calculate cost per beneficial compound instead of cost per ounce, the math changes dramatically. You're essentially buying sugar water with honey flavoring. Then there's the environmental angle nobody talks about. Heavy filtering requires more energy, more equipment, more processing steps. All that industrial machinery just to make honey taste like nothing special. Store brand honey represents everything wrong with our food system's obsession with uniformity over authenticity. We've trained ourselves to expect blandness and call it quality control. But the biggest disappointment? You'll never experience what honey is supposed to taste like. Each floral source creates distinct flavors, some grassy, some fruity, some almost wine-like. However, not all mass-market honey falls into these traps. Kirkland's signature honey sits in those massive warehouses like a sweet golden mystery. You know what I'm talking about, those bear-shaped squeeze bottles that could probably survive a nuclear apocalypse. But here's where things get murky, and I don't mean the honey itself. The biggest red flag? Nobody really knows where this stuff comes from. Well, technically, someone does, but good luck getting a straight answer. One batch might be from Argentina, the next from who knows where in Asia. It's like playing geographical roulette with your breakfast toast, and before you say, so what? Honey is honey. Hold your horses there, partner. When honey gets shipped around the globe like a world traveler with commitment issues, something gets lost in translation. That something is character. Real honey should tell a story. It should whisper about the wildflowers down the road or shout about that amazing orange blossom season. Kirkland's honey, it's about as chatty as a mime. The flavor profile is flatter than a pancake that's been run over by a steamroller. Then there's the processing situation. Remember when your grandmother used to complain about store-bought bread having no texture? Same principle applies here. This honey goes through more filtering than a paranoid email server. All that processing strips away the good stuff. The pollen, the natural enzymes, the tiny particles that make honey actually, well, honey-like. You'll notice something weird when you buy Kirkland honey. It never crystallizes. Never. That's like meeting someone who claims they never have bad hair days. Suspicious, right? Natural honey crystallizes because it's alive with all sorts of microscopic goodies. When honey stays liquid forever, it's been processed within an inch of its life. But here's what really gets my goat: the traceability nightmare. Food safety experts have been raising eyebrows about this for years. When honey comes from multiple countries and gets blended together, tracking problems becomes impossible. It's like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach while wearing a blindfold. Don't get me wrong, Kirkland honey won't kill you. It's perfectly safe and stupidly cheap. If you're baking cookies for the church fundraiser and need 5 pounds of sweetener, knock yourself out. But if you want honey that actually tastes like it came from bees instead of a chemistry lab, you might want to reconsider. The sweetness hits your tongue like a sugar bomb with zero complexity. No floral notes, no regional character, no seasonal variation. It's the vanilla ice cream of the honey world. Technically correct, but utterly forgettable. Makes sense why serious honey lovers avoid this stuff like bad karaoke, right? But enough doom and gloom. Let's talk about honey that'll actually make your taste buds do a happy dance. After calling out 5 honey brands that might disappoint your taste buds, let's talk about the good stuff. Nature. Nate's raw and unfiltered honey is like finding a $20 bill in your old coat pocket, unexpectedly satisfying. This isn't your grandmother's squeeze bear honey, folks. Nature. Nate's keeps things simple with their 100% pure, raw, and unfiltered approach. Think of it as the difference between a fresh tomato from your garden versus that pink thing they call a tomato at the grocery store in January. What makes this brand stand out? They actually test their honey for pesticides, antibiotics, and sneaky additives. Makes sense, right? It's like having a bodyguard for your breakfast toast. Most commercial honey brands skip this step faster than teenagers avoid eye contact at family dinners. But here's where it gets interesting. Nate's offers variety without sacrificing quality. Their classic blend, organic options, and local varieties come from trusted beekeepers who know their craft. These aren't factory farms with bees wearing hard hats. We're talking about real artisans who understand that good honey takes time. And the weird part is how much their Manuka honey impressed me personally. It carries UMF certification, which guarantees potency and authenticity. For those unfamiliar, Manuka honey is like the luxury car of the honey world, expensive but worth every penny for its unique properties. Let's not forget the crystallization factor. Remember how those filtered honeys stayed suspiciously smooth? Well, Nate's honey crystallizes naturally, which might seem like a flaw, but actually proves its authenticity. Raw honey crystallizes because it contains real pollen and natural sugars. It's supposed to do that. The floral taste complexity here beats those bland processed alternatives by miles. Each jar tells a story about where the bees traveled, what flowers they visited, and when the harvest happened. You can actually taste the difference between spring wildflower and fall clover varieties. Customer reviews consistently praise the rich, robust flavor that changes with each batch. Exactly what you want from authentic honey. It's like wine appreciation, but stickier and less pretentious. Then there's their commitment to sustainable practices. Nate's works with beekeepers who prioritize bee health over maximum production. In an era where colony collapse disorder threatens bee populations, supporting responsible honey producers feels like the right move. Price-wise, yes, you'll pay more than store-brand honey, but considering the quality difference, it's like comparing a home-cooked meal to fast food. Both fill you up, but only one leaves you truly satisfied. Nate's proves that good honey still exists if you know where to look, but they're not the only brand worth your attention. There's another company that takes honey craftsmanship to an entirely different level. Now here's the second honey brand that actually deserves a spot in your pantry. The Savannah Bee Company isn't just another fancy label trying to charge you extra for pretty packaging. These folks down in Savannah, Georgia know their bees better than my grandmother knew her bridge partners. And trust me, that woman could spot a cheater from 3 tables away. What makes Savannah Bee Company different? They're obsessed with single flower honeys. You know how some people collect vintage wines from specific vineyards? Well, these honey makers do the same thing with nectar sources. Their Tupelo honey comes from one type of tree. Their orange blossom honey? Yep, just orange blossoms. But why does this matter for your taste buds? Single flower honeys taste completely different from each other. It's like comparing a jazz concert to a rock show. Both are music, but the experience is totally unique. Tupelo honey has this buttery smoothness that never crystallizes. Orange blossom brings citrus notes that'll make you think you're eating sunshine. The weird part is how much flavor gets lost in those big commercial blends. It's like mixing a fine whiskey with grape soda. Technically still alcohol, but you've murdered everything interesting about it. Then there's their commitment to bee conservation. While other companies treat bees like tiny factory workers, Savannah Bee Company actually cares about keeping these little guys healthy and happy. They work directly with beekeepers who use sustainable practices. Makes sense, right? Healthy bees make better honey. Stressed out bees in industrial operations? Not so much. Their harvesting methods are refreshingly old school. No heavy filtering that strips out all the good stuff. No heating that kills beneficial enzymes. They basically let the honey be honey instead of turning it into glorified corn syrup. And the crystallization? Beautiful. Natural honey crystallizes over time, and Savannah Bee Company's products do exactly that. If your honey sits in the cupboard for months without changing texture, something's been messed with during processing. Well, here's something most people don't know. You can actually taste the difference between stressed bees and happy bees in the final product. Happy bees make richer, more complex honey. It's like the difference between a home-cooked meal and fast food. The price point sits higher than grocery store honey, but you're paying for actual craftsmanship. Think of it as the difference between buying a mass-produced painting at a big box store versus getting something from a local artist who actually knows their craft. But why should you care about artisanal honey when the cheap stuff sweetens your tea just fine? Because once you taste real, minimally processed honey with distinctive floral notes, going back to the filtered, blended stuff feels like switching from fresh orange juice to Tang powder. Your morning routine deserves better than mediocre honey.